Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Three podcast. I'm Shauna, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Dale and Liam. This week, we open up the forum to politics and how it overlaps with our personal lives. As nosy as I am, I want to know how Dale and Liam feel about what I would call the three hot topics in politics of 2020. Brexit, climate change, and of course, the government's handling of the pandemic. Don't worry, we'll get right back to the good stuff soon. But for this week, before we get into Brexit, let's begin with discussing how we see politics already in our personal lives. Let's get to it! So I find it hard to distinguish anything not being political in my personal life. Do you find that everything is political, or do you find that you can distinguish between them?
I think I'm starting to realise that I'm a very political person. And I think what makes me political is by nature the things that make me who I am. Obviously, the colour of my skin, sexuality, gender, all of these different elements. And I realise my everyday is sort of a political journey or experience. It's always political because there are things going on where, through me being me, it's harder, it's like, in conflict with that. And I think, I'd just like to realise that actually I'm more political because I've learned what that means to be more political, being more in support of, women being in sort of employment in, my own company. Looking at the gender pay gap and being in support of that idea, and, you can sort of make your everyday political in a way that, depending on what your beliefs are, mine is to make sure everyone lives in an environment where they feel supported in some way. That's my responsibility, I feel, as a person. So I'm always political by nature.
Yeah.
I kind of say the same. I feel like that, again, my existence as being, a gay man, for example, even that in and of itself is, a political statement because of kind of the whole context that surrounds that. And I think a lot of, people's, intersections, that kind of
We should just name this series Intersections.
Do you know what
It was because it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's so inescapable.
Yeah.
And I feel like that actually, because if you intersect on, an identity that isn't really seen as the norm as much as, things are obviously changing, but if you sit in that identity, then I think that in and of itself, just your existence is a political statement. In terms of it shouldn't be, but in the current context, it is. So therefore, it's quite hard to kind of not see life through a political lens, particularly when it kind of sort of helps you understand why perhaps certain things aren't as accessible to you as they would have been had you not been someone else. And I feel like that maybe it's partly because, at least for me personally, I feel like my existence is kind of a political statement, and I have had barriers that I think that I tend to more on the side of, as you guys kind of sort of said, just making sure that kind of sort of people get the things that they need in order to be able to sort of live. Actually, to be honest with you, sometimes the real enemy are the people that are sitting in power. Maybe if people weren't squabbly, we could actually look at our government properly and be like, actually, no, we're not standing for this. This isn't what we voted for. Chow love, get someone better to do the job kind of thing.
So that brings me on to something I was going to bring up anyway, so I'm going to bring up now, because it's so tied into what you just said. There is a documentary on Netflix, obviously, because that's the only TV I watch. And I'm going to try and find his documentary on here while I speak to find his name, but it's called Saving Capitalism. And he was part of the Bush presidency. He worked beside Bush to put into laws. And this documentary, it doesn't say that it's capitalism is bad. Again, I don't believe that capitalism is bad. It's been good for us in a certain sense, where we've gotten to the point where we've got economies, we've got a fixed trading way of going about it, even though it's controlled by a group of people, but we'll get onto that one. But he also explores the fact that, especially in America, it is based in America. I do think that some of the applications that he's saying could be applied to British government as well, but obviously they have a much more capitalist society than than even we do, where we have kind of prime minister more than like a president as well. How the political system, the democracy has now become what the corporations, the 1%, the people who have money, can focus their money into politicians to then get political favours, rather than actually enacting policy that is to benefit the lives of the everyday people. So one of the examples that he presents, or what the statistics that he was presenting, was that policies are 80% likely to be passed in their parliamentary system, whatever they call it, their Senate, through their process, 80% likely to be passed if they want it to be passed. However, the average person, no matter how you mix it, it ended up that if you had majority people who did not want a law to pass, it would pass 30%. 30% likely for a policy that you wanted, that everybody wanted to pass, it was 30% no matter what order you put them in, whether or not the people wanted it or whether or not they didn't, they had 30% likelihood to get what it is that they want, whereas companies had 80% chance.
80?
So no matter what if you think it's wrong, if you think it's right, you have 30% chance of enacting a policy that would suit that. Or stopping a policy that would suit that. 30% chance. But if you don't donate enough to their kind of, wherever they're kind of, where they've got political pull.
Foundations, charities, that sort of thing.
People don't donate money for nothing.
No.
They donate because they want something in return. So what is it that they're getting in return? It was 90... So straight through from like the 40s, 60s, but it ended in 1998 and looking at when kind of Bush was in, and they were looking at the laws that have been passed that have basically caused their system to become this 1% and this big economic gap that pharmaceutical companies, for example, they brought out a 24-year-old, she's a student, she found out she had cancer, and she was looking through and she's insured with an insurance company in America. Obviously we have the NHS, so this only really applies to America. She had an insurance company, and their insurance company told her that they don't cover the entire cost of her cancer pills. So in order to be insured and afford the medicine that she needs to get through chemotherapy, she needed to find $3,000 a month.
What?
That was with insurance.
That is crazy. And that, $3,000 a month as well, that's not, depending on kind of sort of where you are, I know that, taxes work slightly differently in the US, so people are paid a bit more, but that's still
translates to
3 times people's rent.
She literally was like, that's 3 months pay for me. How do I find that in 6 months? And the reason why pharmaceutical companies were able to do that in the US is for a couple of reasons. One being, in the UK we have a centralised healthcare system, which means they can buy it in bulk and they can fix the price, which means they can say this is the price for the entire country.
Yeah.
Whereas not having a centralised healthcare system, you're basically buying for your practice and your practice only. Secondly is they passed a bill that basically stopped the American government from being able to basically regulate these prices. They actually passed it. There was a whole thing about these Republicans saying, it's unlawful, the literal everything that's going on this year is apparently unlawful.
I get if you want to have a free market when it's I don't know, chess sets and cups and all of those kind of other industries, things that are again, I wouldn't say for luxuries, but when you're talking about people and a healthcare system, I don't understand why you would want a free market. I think no, it's people's lives, have it so that everybody gets treated the same on health. It doesn't matter if it's about shoes or all this kind of stuff, but when you apply that to, I don't know, institutions where you're supposed to look after people, then shit like that happens.
I think it's also about setting the standards that, as well, because our NHS, for example, is obviously free to the point of use, and it's kind of if you depending on the sort of quality of care you want, in a way, you could, if you could afford it, you could go private. There is still that sort of
option to get better service.
Yeah, but as a very minimum, there's a certain standard where anyone needing, potentially life-threatening sort of things, like, medications to save them from, dying or whatever. I think that should come as a minimum. This is affecting someone's life, and there's no way she would be able to get $3,000 to
stay alive, especially
Exactly.
especially at the same time as going through chemotherapy.
Yeah.
You're not going to be working like full time, really, are you? You're going to be sick a lot of the time. Have some compassion.
Yeah.
But do you notice that they passed a law that allowed this to happen in Parliament? So not Parliament, Senate, whatever their equivalent.
Congress, I think.
There we go. Thank you. They passed that bill at 1 a.m. so that no one would see, no one would be watching while they were literally bargaining with each other to get votes.
And I'm assuming that the American people didn't get the option to be like, is this what you want to happen to your healthcare system?
I mean, it wasn't like a referendum because you only get once in a lifetime of that.
But they don't have a say in really their healthcare system there in general, because obviously, well, I guess Obamacare, some people were against that, but Trump, for example, dismantling parts of that, the people of America didn't really have a say, because obviously in Congress they can say, this is what's happening, and you have corporations that can spend money
to buy favours for what they want to pass.
Yeah. And sway the market how they want it to go, to make profits.
And
why is that, actually?
Yeah, and so how can everything politics then becomes political? Because at the end of the day, the root of how we're running our democracies is not necessary for the many.
I think sometimes politicians are often guilty of playing the political game rather than listening. And actually, it's not really hard to listen because we all have social media and we've all got news, and we all have different ways of communicating. And I think, they might be guilty more of getting one off on the other. If we think about our current politicians in the UK, it's more about the drama and the sense of making it seem like you're, to be doing something.
Yeah.
But when it actually comes to listening to what many people are saying about homelessness in Brighton, for example, why is that a thing when this country is
so rich?
very rich. It's probably one of the richest countries in the world. And I'm not saying I have a solution to necessarily solve homelessness, but I think, as you say, there's things they can do rather than saying, oh, we've brought homelessness down by X amount of thousands or hundreds. And less arguing the argument about the numbers, but actually doing something where it doesn't exist. And I think the Conservatives pledged to reduce homelessness, I think by 2022, 25, something around there.
When we would have forgotten about it.
Yeah, but there's also this idea is why this is something that is long overdue, and this is something that's been coming from the people for a long time. So it's what can we do to ensure that's how all of our policies go, whereby there is something to ensure that this thing that's bad for a country or bad for us as individuals isn't a thing. Whereas whether or not it's homelessness or being paid, gender pay gap or racial disparities or whatever it might be, our governments are doing something about it and not spending too much time infighting.
I think that's also what comes back to what he was presenting, why I think it's relatable in the Saving Capitalism documentary, why it's relatable to here as well. We might not have such obvious corporate investment, but think about our laws. We give tax havens to companies who basically don't pay millions in tax, both here and in other countries. I think Google in America was saving $11 billion a year on taxes from tax breaks. They literally passed this law in America where, again, in the documentary, where I think it was to actually stop it, but then they reversed it later. CEOs were getting basically tax cut, breaks from being a CEO, basically, from what I understood anyway. It was kind of oh, you're a CEO? Okay, well, we won't tax you as much on your salary. And as much as we don't have laws like that here, we do find that corporations either don't pay any tax at all or pay minute levels of tax compared to the amount of money that they make in this country, and they can afford to pay the tax that they're not paying and still be billionaires.
Yeah.
They're also showing yes, we do slightly tax higher earners, but if you think about it, that tax level, that change is around 40k, which I think most people should be earning. You shouldn't, inflation. We shouldn't be still like, minimum wage shouldn't be £7. It's not inflated that much since the 60s. Brexit applies to everybody. It changes everybody's lives. Everybody had their say, and they had to enact the rules. Now, we look at the Brexit campaign. Boris, and I'm pretty sure this guy, Boris and Nigel were like little devil on your shoulder, I swear. Because they were lying. It was Boris and Nigel who were pledging things and had no power to pledge them. At least with David Cameron, if he was saying he was going to do something in the Remain campaign, he was at least the Prime Minister and he could have bloody at least taken it to Parliament. Yeah. But you, as an MP, you don't really have any power. You'll find that people are a little bit standoffish when we haven't actually voted you in, much why they both her and Boris opted to have elections. But then she employed Boris. She put Boris on her party, and what did Boris do? Vote down her Brexit transition period bill. For what other reason? For the fact that he wasn't the one putting it on the table.
I mean, there was some.
I think there were
sizable.
Yeah, but the sizable amendments, I think, are the ones that are
the most worried.
The most concerning, particularly to do around some sort of border in terms of trade border between the UK and Ireland, like as in
Northern Ireland as well. Yeah,
Ireland.
And the laws
as well. The bit I did kind of like the sound of is that we are at a point where Boris has obviously put the thing on the table, and this is what it is. And if it doesn't work out, I think from what I've read, Northern Ireland and Ireland gets a say in terms of them two as two different countries essentially that decide what happens between that trade relationship, whether or not they want to be sort of on the UK or EU sort of tariffs or whatever it is.
Oh, the election thing.
Yeah, election, and every couple of years they can then vote.
The problem with that election though is that at the time they didn't even have a sitting parliament.
No, they haven't had one. I think they have one now.
They have one now, yeah.
I'm pretty sure
they didn't have one for years,
yeah.
And at the time in which you're doing this agreement, you're basically asking people who cannot agree to come to work.
Yeah.
That was the issue as well. It was like, okay, you're giving this, but they can't even sort their shit out. So how do you expect them to vote?
They had a parliament before then. Like, they've had a parliament ever since the Good Friday Agreement. But in terms of, so a couple of years ago, something happened, and I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been something to do, they couldn't agree on a bill, maybe?
Yeah, it was some kind of bill. See, no one even remembers it was so long ago.
I mean, they have one now, but they always have to have, like, 50%, like, one party and 50% of some, well, 50% representing wanting a united Ireland, I think, and 50% representing a unified. I mean, one where it's separated.
Yeah.
It's really complicated.
We do need to get to that point whereby they have to vote for that in the first place because we had Theresa's bill.
I mean, the whole bloody voting on the Theresa May bill over and over and over again. 3 times it went through, and then all he did was make an amendment to one part of it, which that same part he now wants to renege on. His part.
Yeah.
That he wants to now go against. Like, he can't make up his mind. He's so hot and cold. You don't know where he's going to stand. The reason why...
I think I figured out where he stands.
I mean, he stands for himself.
Yeah, and I think he wants to... A part of me think, and I'll be surprised to see what happens in December, thinks that they could get us to a point where actually it's kind of a forced no deal still.
His whole intention the whole time was no deal. I've been saying it for 3 years. Like, he doesn't want to, even before last year when he got put into position, into leadership, and before the election, I'm telling you, the guy was saying no to Theresa's deal because it wouldn't end up with no deal.
Yeah.
He doesn't want a deal.
Yeah.
And putting in a deadline and demanding it happen in the middle of a fucking pandemic.
I never necessarily thought that us leaving the EU was the most sensible idea in the first place, but I think, fair enough, if that's what you want to do and if people believe in it and blah, 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 blah. And I kind of come to the point where I can see that there are benefits as well, which, again, I feel like that after also being told for 4 years that it's going to happen, it's kind of like we have to kind of get used to it. But I still feel like there are benefits. In the same way, there are also negatives too. But I kind of think that, in the middle of a pandemic, when the economy's just shrunk by 20%, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now, surely it would make sense to just kind of sort of wait to see what's happening with that first, before then deciding to go through a massive change in the middle of a massive change.
I really like your deal with Japan. I still don't. I never really looked into it that much. You can educate me if there is information that I missed, because I just got pissed off with Brexit and I just hung it up. But this deal with Japan, all I can see was what the UK are getting. What are we giving up?
I think you need to know, like, how can we vote on governments, for example, and things like that if we don't know what it is that's going on? And I think that they do use a lot of legal speak, because it's laws, so obviously. But then I think, why not just have a more accessible way of the average person being able to understand that? Because then we would all be able to make a bit more of an informed decision and decide that, actually, maybe we don't want that to happen. I don't know. Maybe we don't want this deal with Japan because maybe it's going to involve...
So, did you just want it with other countries is what I'm asking? The thing is about Brexit, and it's really annoying because I feel like it overlaps with the pandemic, and everything overlaps with the pandemic right now, but with the pandemic happening and everything changing, even though they tried to pretend like it's not, we can go back to normal and we could just pretend like we've dealt with it and it's past us, when it's not. But it's here and things are changing and corporations are changing how they're working. Businesses you find so much more people doing subscription services than just like kind of, I'll buy one time for us, they'll be like, buy a subscription. You've got razors, you've got makeup, you've got hair products, you've got gadgets, you've got everything. You've got a subscription box for something. The world is changing how we interact. It's not like a one-time thing anymore. It's kind of like I am choosing where I want to invest my money. But do you know what I mean? Like, the world is changing and therefore our laws need to move quicker with us. We can't be negotiating trade deals when we don't really know what we need. The world is changing. The country is changing. The way in which we work is changing. I really do think that eventually people will just be like, this is life now, and get to the new normal and forget what they used to have and continue to do what they were doing, maybe with a few less restrictions, but they'll still kind of have, there's no point changing it. And if a pandemic happens again, you're already set up to just deal with it. No economic damage whatsoever. Maybe it gives employers the chance to say, do you know what, it does not matter where you live. I could hire someone in Scotland and be in London and we still be able to work.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that also, in a way, like, help with...
austerity?
Not necessarily austerity, but unemployment, for example. Because actually, running an office, there's so many facilities and things that you need to maintain in terms of, and I'm sure you probably pay some, like, probably a big sort of rent and all of that sort of stuff you can save on by employing more people who are already in their own spaces that, I guess maybe on their side, they can sort of apply for a small percentage of their tax reduced by working, gas and electricity and that sort of stuff, some sort of contribution, sorry.
Yeah.
But overall, actually, you have the scope to hire more people who are going to be at home. Parents, for example, that don't necessarily have childcare or just coming out of maternity leave and all of that stuff. Why do you need to go to the office, spend money on transport and all? I guess that makes
because
sense.
It contributes to the economy.
Yeah.
So it's so exactly that. So it's kind of like, okay, if I don't need to do that and I'm able to have the flexibility, and I do think it will empower women more to be able to kind of advance their careers while having children. Obviously women tend to be a lot later to have children now because they want to focus on their careers. Me myself, I'm like 30 now and I'm pretty sure my parents would have expected me to have hopped out at least 2 kids by now. But do you know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden there's these opportunities to not have to be in a central hub of London. Then people can invest in other areas. They can invest in places. And that's why I said austerity, because I do think it would help deal with this austerity, because all of a sudden, if you're at home and I need to pop to the shops, I'm going down into town. I'm not like in London where I've gotten the train into doing it. I'm actually investing in my society, local community.
Economy,
Which is so important.
Which is a big thing. Yeah,
you can create, rather than diverting all of this sort of traffic and...
to the big cities.
Divert them to local places, and you see that more areas are going to thrive from, having that very centralised sort of base being your home, and then everything else around it.
Yeah,
because like obviously with things like, again, like the retail industry and like all of that kind of stuff in restaurants and things like that. If you think about, say, Brighton, for example, there's a lot of people that live in Brighton that work in London, and there's a lot of people that then, obviously, as you said, like you know, they're in London, so they're gonna, like, you know, buy stuff there, whether it's, like, their clothes, their food, their blah, blah, blah. But now they're obviously at home, it's kind of like, obviously, you know, eating out is still a bit contentious at the moment, at least as of recording. But I kind of feel like, again, once it's safer to, you can, like, do that, and then suddenly, like, the local economy goes up, and then suddenly, like, instead of all of the wealth being centralised in London, then suddenly, again, you find that communities are way more empowered, and actually there's more resource to go around, so people live more comfortably.
Yeah, and the quality of life could be more tailored to your need as an individual or your community's need, because what, you know, we need down in, let's say, somewhere in Sussex, Red Hill, place I've never been to, just making it up, in relationship to London, let's say I'm a worker that commutes to London, what my needs are in my local area is so completely different to what I need in London. In London, I need quick transport, I need things to be, I guess things kind of make sense that they're at the price they are sometimes, because I think, like, it's kind of seen as being vibrant and all that sort of stuff. But I think actually if you brought some of that home, whereby you've got the rates here in terms of the amenities you have in your local area so much better, you can actually see each of these areas becoming their own sort of mini version of London in different places, in smaller communities.
I don't understand why it's wrong to, instead of go these places are our cities, why not have the whole country booming? Like, why is there a small town somewhere that has no job opportunities and people have got to travel out because you decided it has to be in a hub? Why does it have to be in a hub?
I understand. I mean, you can understand it when it was like
back in the day. Yeah,
but it's not needed anymore.
Even 15 years ago, I can see why. But even now, like with the boom of internet, the connection, how quick things are in terms of communication, we could do that instantaneously right now from anywhere.
Yeah,
and that's the reason why it's important for us to maybe adapt that way, because I think it will give people more options to explore different parts of themselves and their lives.
And it's funny how, like, Boris is saying, you know, go to London because the shop owners need your money, but yet the high street has been dying for years, slow death, and yet no one's been trying to save the high street. So why should we bail out these big companies when people can't even afford to pay their rent? They're getting worried about being kicked out of their houses and losing their jobs. So one of the things I actually saw that would kind of change policy to focus on individuals and not corporations was actually, it came from Bernie Saunders.
Okay.
So, no, that's a lie. He did adopt it though. It came from, what is his name? Andrew Yang, I think his name is. And he basically presented that we should have a basic universal income. And it has been tabled in the UK as well by some Lib Debs and stuff like that. So there's the essence of it. And I'm going to use Andrew Yang's one because I listened to his interview one time when he explained it and it just worked. So, it would be that there wouldn't be a benefit system. So at the moment we have a benefit system. There wouldn't be a benefit system as we know it. Instead, when you turn 18, so you'd go from maybe child benefits to an adult universal income. And every adult from 18 to death receives £1,000 a month. He said dollars, I'm using pounds just because it's easier. So £1,000 a month, regardless of what you do. Outside of that, you can still work and you can still earn more, but you get £1,000. So if you were in a couple or a family or living with friends like we used to, imagine if we, when we were living together, had £1,000 a month each. That's £3,000 a month to put towards bills, rent, just buying like things that we needed to move in. We'd have loads of that money left because it wouldn't have taken us to, like, our rent alone was half that. And then our salaries. Now, salaries might change, but everyone gets that £1,000 a month. So it's kind of like, actually, your salary has come down, but because you've already got a guaranteed income.
I guess if you think of like an average sort of working person that's renting, £1,000 covers, like, again, their bills, their rent, their food.
I think actually it's as easy as, not even if we didn't have that universal income, it's as easy as legislating something whereby actually, or encouraging more renters or landlords to go through a scheme whereby actually you paying rent and paying the amount of money we do every month kind of shows
on our credit rate, at least.
On our credit rating, but also shows that we've got that spending power in a way that's not necessarily recognised now. Because actually banks will see this and say, oh, they've not even missed a payment since they've lived here for the last 5 years, 6 years. and they've got a steady income, and they're still earning this money.
So you can afford this mortgage.
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
Plus savings.
Things are going to change, which is kind of brings me back to the whole Brexit, why you still negotiating during a pandemic thing, is suddenly if more people are working from home and corporations, I'm sorry, you're going to do it for a year and you're not going to go back.
Yeah.
But it also means that we don't have to hub into the cities, they don't have to pile us on top of each other.
What would you say about to those people,
Yes.
though, however, that I guess don't like the idea of working from home and prefers that sort of...
The thing is, I think that's okay,
Yeah.
but giving the people to, like, the flexibility, like, I don't think it's bad if you have your staff on a rotation and they come in a couple of days a week so they can have some... Because, like, you're not going to be having a complete, full, packed office like you used to. There are people who live on their own, who enjoy, like, being able to get out of that. Like, you don't want people's mental health to deteriorate, but there is no point saying, I want 80% of the workforce back. Why, Boris? So that you can get money on public transport that no one wants to get on.
Yeah. But then also, at the same time, knowing full well that we are still in the midst of a pandemic, but then equally...
Exactly.
Saying that we're now in this phase, or blaming groups of people to say that it's your fault, but actually, you know, we had the help out scheme.
Yes. We were told to do it.
Workers going back into the offices. We have different things telling. This is why I feel like everything makes at least for me, makes the personal political, because these are things that sort of infringe on my own life in terms of like being in lockdown, and actually what the choice I now want to make, which is that I would prefer not to go back into the office permanently. And I think maybe a lot of people during, like, in my own office and stuff might feel that way as well. But I know the government's not necessarily going to give a clear direction, but for some other people, they may say, like, we're encouraging businesses for everyone to go out, and employees are going to feel pressured to go back into the...
when they don't necessarily want to.
Yeah, and you might work for a company or a charity or an organisation of some sort that actually, because the government are sort of given this very loose suggestions and implying that, you know, it's safe and all of this sort of stuff, when it isn't really, from what they've also said. Like, that's only going to make people more frustrated, and we're seeing more protests and that sort of stuff because people are taking the situation into their own hands. Pandemic or not, I'm going to still go to the beach. Not me personally, but I might go to the beach.
Like, I feel like in terms of kind of like, it was probably more dangerous back during the time when we weren't wearing masks and weren't doing all this and stuff than it is now.
Yeah.
So we kind of have some of it. But I do agree with you. I feel like they don't really know what they're doing, but then I feel like, again, as you're right, nobody really knows what they're doing. But I think they just need to have something and be consistent. Because I think if you keep going back and forth, people are just going to be like, you're really pissing me off, and you're really disrupting my life. Like, and again, it does make the personal political, and it makes the political very personal at the same time, because these things do have an impact on our lives, and some people will turn around and say, like, and I've heard them say, like, I'm not a very political person, I don't really care about it, it's not really my thing, and it's like, but...
I've said from the very beginning of the pandemic, when they were comparing this to the Spanish flu, I was like, okay, we are at a time in which we have way more scientific progress than we did in 1918. However, this was here, they took an X amount of time to get a vaccine, 12 to 18 months. It was around before it disappeared, I believe. I might be wrong. I don't think there's a vaccine. I'm pretty sure it just kind of went away after 12 to 18 months. And I was like, okay, the scientists are telling me to get a vaccine for something like this, which we will need, it's going to take 12 to 18 months. So I'm like, look, this is short term in life, but it's here for like the immediate future.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start setting my mindset to be like, do you know what? What should the new norm be? What should my new norm be? I knew that the stringent lockdown wouldn't be forever. I knew we'd be able to kind of move around, and that was never going to be stuck in stone. But life needed to change to adapt, to be able to get to the point where if something like this happens again, our economy is not going to tank because of it.
Yeah.
We have been plunging into, again, like what they've been saying in the Saving Capitalism documentary that I mentioned. People are no longer trusting their governments. One of the things that he said, in American government, I completely agree with it. Here with Brexit, we were polar opposites. We were kind of down the middle. That was kind of the same with quite a few things. Do you know what I mean? So they were saying that in I can't remember, I think it was the 50s or 60s, most people polled said that they trusted in their government. It was like 80% that was trusted in their government, or 70% actually. It was 70% said they trusted in their government and they believed that they would enact policies that would help them. Today is about 30%.
Wow.
Or less. I think it was less. I think I'm still putting the things in from the other one, but it was similar. It was like today it was kind of like 20% of America don't actually like believe that their government are doing what's right for them. And it's also happening here. And like I said, with Brexit, us being polar opposites, the literal pull to the left and pull to the right, that is a sign of unrest, a sign of unsatisfaction, a sign that we can't come together because we need different things and no one's addressing different things. They're actually not addressing the things that we believe in at all, because both of us are pulling. Because neither side believe that the government is actually representing them, and that's worrying, because if both sides don't believe that, who are the government representing?
Yeah. But then it's also that scary part of maybe the government can't represent either side, and there will always be that conflict where nothing can unify both sides in a way whereby we have a situation like Brexit, where, you know, I guess the country in some way, like, maybe they felt split, but there was still that 52%, I believe, that still voted for Brexit.
Yeah.
And, you know, we now need to be at a place where we're compromising on both of those. No one solution is going to work for both, but it should be focused into unifying rather than keeping these things as two separate sort of different conflicts going on, left, right sort of thing. Whether or not there is that such spectrum, left, right, blah, blah. But,
I don't think there should be. To be honest with you, I kind of think that basic human needs shouldn't be a political issue, in my opinion. I think that regardless of whether you sit left or right, if someone was to turn around and say to you, do you want to make sure that you can live comfortably, like, without suffering, without discrimination, without that kind of stuff, the majority of people, I'm sure, would turn around and say yes. And I'm sure if they was to turn around and go, oh, well, there's this group of people that can make that happen for you, I'm sure the majority of people go, okay, do it. Like, I think that there's so much playing politics around politics. Exactly.
I don't know whether or not you guys saw it, but they did this documentary called The Social Dilemma.
No,
I don't think I've seen it.
Well, it obviously... So The Social Dilemma is basically... it is a documentary, although they do kind of dramatise it. It's a bit weird. And they are actually interviewing people who used to work for massive tech companies. So you're talking about Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Google, like all of Silicon Valley, basically. And they were instrumental in things like the like button on Facebook. The way that, like everything that we use now, they were like normally at the conception of these kind of softwares that we now incorporate into our day-to-day life. And they are basically... A lot of them ended up quitting because of the fact that they didn't think, essentially, that the ethics of internet use and the way that we're using the internet for these companies. For me, it's kind of like, well, these people, they invested in what capitalism is. They did what they made money. They found ways to churn an income and continue to make that grow, which is essentially what you ask of human beings. They've just done it in their own ways, right? But what they're saying is actually some of these algorithms that they have that push content to you. So, for example, if you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, the Cambridge Analytica whole thing that all ties into it is this, the essence that if you have shown signs that you could have tendencies to go into conspiracy theories, you know, if you believe that the world is flat, or, do you know what I mean? That's something like that is kind of against the widely known consensus. Then they would start suggesting to you other videos and posts that you should be watching that then kind of caused into this spiral of, and then because the algorithm sees that you watching these hate videos, then they keep showing you these hate videos. And they keep showing you these hate videos until you start believing them. So they were essentially, again, they're all American Silicon Valley. It's the one of the two places where most tech companies come from. They were basically saying that with the election and with the whole Hillary conspiracy and stuff like that, all of those things. Imagine you're constantly like being pushed videos of Fox News, who rarely tell the truth, let's face it, who rarely give you the bigger picture. They just kind of keep it to what they think that you would be interested in. It's exactly the same within the internet. So it's just pushing you content that will help you believe that, and it's blurring the lines between people's truths. You're on the left, you see videos on the left, you see all the people that you connect with who are on the left, you're not going to be shown the conspiracy theories because you're not the person who tends to believe in those kind of theories, so therefore they'll show you something else. And that's how the divide that they've come, where they believe that how Trump won the election. So it's based on that. Obviously there's a lot more to it than what I'm explaining, but to kind of bring it into the conversation, I wanted to kind of give you that kind of background. With that idea, I thought it was really interesting. Like I didn't believe everything that they say. I take everything with a pinch of salt because I'm kind of like, I see where you're coming from. But I did kind of understand in terms of like we talk about it all the time when we're on social media and we are scrolling, we just keep scrolling, and then they do dramatize it with these little people, like they're in your phone and they're like, there's like a hologram of you and like, okay, he's stopping on this, okay, monetize over here and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, you're mistaking it a bit too far, but okay. But that kind of sense that people are only kind of being in their own bubbles, and again, not having regulations for these companies. Like, I don't believe that politics has caught up as much as to technologies, let technology bound past it and is now realizing it needs to have regulations in place, where companies can just make billions of money and the product is us, like they're selling us. If the service is free, you are the product.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think I remember seeing, or at least seeing a clip of that. And I remember someone saying, but it was basically a person, and it was kind of the early kind of sort of adopters of internet and stuff, basically saying like, that basically if something is free, then you are it might have been the same thing.
I think I've heard that before, to be fair, so it might not have been, but it does make sense. Like, to me, it's always been like, okay, yeah, you are the product. And for me, that's never not been a known thing. Like, I didn't realize the extent of it, but I did know that, like, if you're using something, you're not paying for it, then they've still got their business at the end of the day. It's still got to be, and it's your data. Now, I don't know if there's any secrets that, now we're finding out with like Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. Well, I suppose they're the same, let's just say Facebook because Facebook is Instagram. But, with like harvesting that data, and then it ended up with something like Cambridge Analytica where they were kind of using that to basically change people's minds. Like, it gives, these companies another way to essentially forge our minds, and it's always been hand in hand, I feel, with politics.
Yeah.
If you look at the Second World War, this is as far as I'm aware, but I don't know, how it used to run or whatever. But if we look at the Second World War, for example, not even the Second World War, the First World War, sorry, when they had the Spanish flu. The reason why it's called Spanish flu, so I understand from various sources on the internet, so do correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand is that because of the war, a lot of countries did not want to kind of bring another downer onto their populations. So instead of reporting on the Spanish flu, they would kind of push media to report about other things. So when historians are kind of looking back and they're kind of like, what happened? They've only got Spanish reports because Spain were the only people who were actually reporting what was happening. And that's why they ended up kind of dubbing it the Spanish flu, even though it affected loads of people. But do you see how it's easy to kind of make people believe that everything's okay, or to take their attention off of something, which I don't believe they can do as easily now because of how connected we are. But they do it in different ways. Yeah. So the other night, I was waiting up to watch the basketball, and I was watching the videos of the wildfires in California. Have you seen them?
Is this the one caused by the gender reveal party?
That's one of them. The thing is the whole country is currently blazing in wildfires.
Oh my god.
I'll show you. I sent this post to my mum. Should never go into my mum's conversation. I sent her a post earlier that was from the Evening Standard that says Boris Johnson worried about money on prime ministerial salary of 150 grand. And she replied, "Oh, bless him," with a palming face. Thing. What was I looking for again? The wildfires. Okay. These are the locations of wildfires.
Oh wow!
Oh my god!
In America,
It's like the whole
at the same time.
Jeez.
They're currently blazing.
Wow.
Well,
That's
at
scary.
the point of posting, which was a couple of days ago. On top of that, have you seen the hurricanes?
No.
They've just had this hurricane in Greece. They don't get hurricanes.
What?
They never really get hurricanes. And now they've just had a hurricane in Greece. You've got wildfires in Australia. So I started spiralling even more and more and more. Until I found this website that was looking back over the last 4 years, so it went back to 2016, and was looking at what it deemed like unrest, social unrest. So it wasn't just like natural events, but it was also kind of like political unrest as well, so like protests and everything like that. So I scrolled to the bottom and I went to see I counted how many were in 2016, and they counted 7 of those events. 2017, 9. In 2018, that was it. 9 events 2018. 2019, there was 10 events. 2020, which has not finished, 15.
Wow.
Jesus Christ.
It's like gone up and up and up and up. Yeah.
Why are we still pumping fossil fuels? We spend more money on pumping fossil fuels than we do actually creating ways in which we can harvest natural renewable resources. And we continue to pump out emissions and say that we're going to lower them by X amount of time, lower them quicker. We've been saying this for decades.
Yeah. It's not like we only knew about this like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
People have been saying this for like as long as we've been alive. Enough time to pass now.
Exactly. I agree.
I think it's a trick, really, because when we think about UK, American terms in terms of politics, they're not very long. When they pass it on, if they don't get into the next term, that's then, the next winner's job to sort of sort out the issues in terms of climate change, different issues that we see in terms of maybe on a local level, homelessness and things like that. It's the local the politicians, they sort of like delay because they want to cater to a certain audience, but not necessarily be seen to do things that will really make a difference in terms of globally, really, like climate change. I mean, from the stuff I've read of Trump and his view about climate change, it's not a good one. And America, through various statistics, comes up as one of the biggest contributor to carbon emissions across the world.
Yeah.
And the fact that the president of a very big and powerful country is kind of almost not really acknowledging that this thing is actually a thing that's going to change, and doesn't understand why people are protesting in the way that this is something he can act now about and do something about, rather than focusing on the fact that there's a certain group of people that's going to vote for him. Let's cater to everything they want in terms of his identity and who he is as a, I guess, more right, sort of swaying, sitting politician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like when you're protesting for certain causes, in fact, actually, I think when you're protesting for all causes, I think damage shouldn't really be the main priority unless it's, I don't know, unless if obviously it's a property that's like a statue, for example. I feel like if you need to tear a statue down, like, well, I feel like you're not murdering people in the street. You're pulling down a monument that shouldn't be there in the first place. It's not an act of violence, like.
But the thing is, who decides?
Yeah, who decides? But also, I think that by having, I don't know, by looking and giving that so much focus, I think that kind of distracts from what those arguments are about.
Yeah.
It's not an argument about whether or not they should do the splash paint over this building or statue, or to remove a statue. It's about what they're actually saying, why they're removing this. That's the important part.
Yeah.
And I think that's the things we need to look at. Like, we know climate change is happening. We're so slow, we're like glacially, I can't even say the word.
Lazily.
Yeah. Like, moving further and
further away from the problem in that we're like pushing it aside, but it's there. And come like 20 years or whatever it might be, you know, we will see a massive difference in terms of like maybe how hot our summers become.
Yeah.
More wildfires and that sort of stuff across the world.
Again, kind of rounding it up to what I was saying at the beginning, we have kind of let our governments lead us in the way in which they think that is best without necessarily representing what the people want, and that's what the governments are supposed to be. So instead of pretending that people aren't upset like about climate change and that you can't see the effects of how people were doing it, come on, you have a year in which a global pandemic hits, big protests in so many different countries. Yeah. I don't know if there is a country that hasn't had a protest this year, because all we hear about is protests in different countries standing against the system. That means that the system that's been built right now is not working, because there's a lot of protests going on now, and it's not even anything really to do with the actual, probably biggest threat right now, which is how we manage to go on in a world where coronavirus exists. But at the same time, it's not necessarily thinking about the masses, it's kind of thinking about what we need to do to make money. And sometimes we have forgotten, I believe, that we've forgotten that the two can be mutually exclusive, don't have to be mutually exclusive. No. My leaving question.
Ooh.
You are Prime Minister.
Ooh.
Right now, let's go with right now. What would be your top 3 priorities?
Is that more what I would want to be the top 3 priorities, or what the top 3 priorities are?
You are Prime Minister. Representative of the country, not only of what you want. So, because you're Prime Minister, you're obviously, like, you need to try and sort this shit out. Like, obviously, I'm not asking you to sort it out, but what kind of areas, for example, would you prioritise? Climate change, and then you would prioritise, like, do you know what I mean? Like, what would be the 3 areas? It doesn't even have to be broad, it could be something specific.
I think for me, my top 3, number 1, maybe, or maybe not putting in any order, but, like, one of them would be, I guess, looking at social laws around things to do with like diversity in work, diversity in terms of our community, and not saying that there should be more diversity necessarily, but more sort of looking at diversity in the intersections and doing more to legislate around the intersections to make sure that everyone is protected in an equal way. Yeah. The second issue I'd look at, because I know it's a massive topic in this country and always has been and maybe always will be, but would be the NHS. That's something I'd want to build in to be something that people can trust in and know that actually this thing, you don't need to worry about, you know, where the funding is coming from, or this fear of it being nationalised or sold off in parts or whatever it is, the opposite of, you know. I'm not really sure what the third thing is.
It can be like I said, you would...
Oh, Brexit. I'll deal with Brexit.
How would you deal with... No, you can't just go, I deal with Brexit. That's like... It's not like, I would implement more, make sure that we've got more power stations and put in green incentives so people can buy hybrids.
I'll probably be, like, lynched for this or something. But, like, I would probably delay it slightly, and not by law. Not
blasphemy.
December was always unreasonable because Boris said it was. It was just always on not a good amount of time. But maybe to like some point after Easter or something, where it's not too far away.
Yeah, and think of a different holiday to do it on.
Yeah, and what I go back, we can create a holiday for it. We can make a holiday for Brexit.
Oh my god, we could have like a long Easter.
Is this going to be like when Harry and Meghan got married and I didn't get a bank holiday? Because at that point I stopped caring.
Yeah, I would have been a bit more invested in their relationship had they got me a bank holiday, but they didn't, so... What else are you doing for me?
I mean, at that point I was like, not interested then. I'm like, okay, cool, that's nice. It's another one of the royal family. Yeah. I didn't know about, but like there's a lot of royal family that like pop up and I'm like, Who are you?
People. I will give people... The fact is that they know what areas now within that withdrawal agreement, and they know what the conversations are. I think there should be a level whereby you've got to, not necessarily a yes or no question, but it's more questions that it's not yes or no, it's more of a statement or more of a something that's summarised legally
Like
what that might be. Yeah. Say like, when the UK leaves the European Union, our fisheries market will be based here and be decided in this way.
Do you want this or do you want this?
Okay. And then depending on what people vote in terms of that could then be the final thing that we're saying. These are what we've discussed. This is...
Okay, but then the EU still got to come back as well. Did they do that with all their countries?
But they would have done that all within the knowledge that they have now about the discussions that they're having around what's
like
possible.
At the same time.
Yeah.
But then you still got to negotiate.
What would you be your top 3 things, babe?
So my top 3 things would be...
You had time.
I think the first thing I would do, actually, is I would reform the education system. I think with Brexit, I'm just going to leave it alone for, because I feel like it's a bit of a minefield. And yeah, so I would deal with, in terms of the health system, I would do things with that. But part of the things I would do would kind of be more to do with outreach try and kind of sort of do more outreach for people who kind of again, people like homeless people, like people that are on drugs, people with mental health problems. And kind of sort of focus more on that to try and sort of rehabilitate. So it's people can be happy.
And I think
and it will help the economy.
Create jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Because it will create jobs, and then it will also create more people that can work, which will generate tax revenue.
More skilled people.
Yeah. And I would say another thing is, it's a bit controversial, but I would subsidise fruit and vegetable kind of farms and stuff and make it so that healthy food is more cheaper and more accessible in supermarkets. Although I did put in my yearbook that I'd either be a biochemist or Prime Minister.
How did that work out?
Well, I'm neither of those things. So. There's still time.
There is still time. Prime Minister's 56.
Exactly. No, I wouldn't want to deal with that shit. Fuck it.
So, my 3 things would be making broadband a utility, making sure that everyone has connections to the internet. I'm sorry guys, but 5G is going to be cool, so it depends on how far I would be in the future to make 5G hacking, because at the moment, let's face it, Boris already fucked that one up. Maybe for good reason, with China, but it's another thing. And make sure that broadband at its current level is fast, people can get good speeds to access the internet. The second thing that I would do is that I actually would give, I would start the universal income.
Oh, UBI.
I would do that. Thing is, the reason why I would do that, so I would give everyone they're £1,000 a month, because they're going to spend that anyway, so I'm going to get the money back. But it would also kind of help with the pandemic, because at the moment, instead of pumping the monies back in to keep the companies, while we readjust and we actually say, okay, what is life now? Because you need to invest it so that we can continue to make money in changing. And then the third thing I would do is I'd look at the curriculum. I'd get it more realistic of multiple sides. At the moment, obviously, the history is written by the winner.
Yeah.
So it is kind of from a perspective that may almost cause people to idolise that person or people or whatever. Thinking that is what actually happened, when actually, from somebody else's point of view, on another country, maybe even just across the channel from France, they might feel that same history is something completely different. And I think that isolates us from being able to understand that people have different realities and different truths depending on where they stand. And that ultimately brings us apart. Good old politics. It's definitely personal, that's for sure.
Yeah, personal politics.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're wanting to hear more from us at the Power of 3 podcast, you can check out previous episodes now. And don't forget to click subscribe to get notified of future episodes. For additional content, behind the scenes fun, and more of our beautiful faces, give us a follow on Instagram at P3podcast. You can follow me on IG at Shay_Cam. Look forward to seeing you there.
You can follow me, Dale, on Instagram at DaleCam11. Yeah, go on, follow me.
Hi, the name's Liam. I've got pics. You want to see them? Well then don't wait till tomorrow. Give us a follow. Go on IG and search at LA Doheny.